everybody, Ellie here with WhoCulture yet again, and we are another day closer to the Star Beast, and I'm getting very excited. We are being spoilt by all the Doctor Who content that's coming our way at the moment. Very exciting times. Having said that, what I want to discuss today is us hoping that things aren't going to take a nosedive. And what I mean by that is, you know, obviously the new Whoniverse has now been confirmed, and we have this kind of wider franchise acknowledgement. But what we would like to discuss is the mistakes and the pitfalls of other such franchises that we hope that the BBC are going to avoid making, or would encourage them to avoid making, with regards to the Doctor Who franchise. Now, I probably should say before we get too far into this, I mean, are we getting ahead of ourselves by making this comparison between the Whoniverse and the MCU? On the one hand, yes, absolutely. I mean, the MCU, it started in 2008, their movies make hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars, and they've already released a gazillion TV shows in quite a short period of time. But on the other hand, no, we're not, because Russell T Davies himself has literally cited the MCU as part of his inspiration with the Doctor Who franchise. I mean, just 8 months before he was announced and confirmed to be returning as showrunner, this is what he said. There should be a Doctor Who channel now. You look at those Disney announcements, all of those new Star Wars and Marvel shows, you think we should be sitting here announcing the Nyssa Adventures or the return of Donna Noble, and you should have the 10th and 11th Doctors together in a 10-part series. So basically, straight from the horse's mouth, as it were, Russell has said that Disney and the MCU were the baseline for his inspiration for where he thought Doctor Who should be moving. I mean, honestly, look, you can't look at the Whoniverse ident that was released and not make comparisons between that and the one for the MCU. It's very clearly been inspired by that. Now, for this discussion, I'm going to structure it slightly differently to how I usually would structure a discussion like this. I'm going to do something that we are quite good at here at WhoCulture. I'm going to form a list. I'm going to make a list. So let's start with point number 1. Don't stretch RTD too thin. So one of the reasons that the MCU was so successful to begin with is because Kevin Feige was directly involved in every single one of those projects. I mean, he is a lifelong fan of Marvel and the comics and things like that, and he even had a hand in producing some of those earlier Marvel productions such as Spider-Man and X-Men and Hulk and things like that. And so when he came into the MCU, he was already a massive fan of what was going on and had a clear idea of where he wanted all these stories to go. But the issue now is that the MCU is just pumping out so much content that it's not possible for Kevin Feige to be involved in every single aspect of it. I mean, we went from 3 movies being released in 2019 to 4 movies and 5 TV series in 2021. And it's just impossible for one person to be able to oversee all of those things to the degree that they would like to, in order to make sure that the quality doesn't slip, which unfortunately that does seem to be the case with the MCU so far. Please don't do that, BBC, Doctor Who. Keep it small and simple and allow our great overlord Russell T Davies to be as involved with each of these projects as he possibly can, so that they come out at the best quality they can possibly be. Quality over quantity is very much a thing that we need to reiterate here. Don't make the same mistake that has happened with the MCU. The thing is with Doctor Who in particular and the MCU is that everything is so connected, and so if you don't have at least one person who's involved with everything and has a clear vision of how everything is going to connect and how things are going to merge into the next story, you could end up with a complete and utter mess. I mean, if you think about surprise, surprise, the River Song story arc, Stephen Moffat would not allow the other writers to write for that character so that he had all the control over how that story developed. And as much as, you know, people like me would get frustrated that River wasn't in it as much as I would have liked, I very much respect that the direction that storyline was going to go was so definitive in Stephen Moffat's mind that he didn't want anyone else to come in and ruin it. And I feel like that's something we need to consider here. You need the man with the vision to be involved with everything so that it all fits together well and doesn't become a jumbled mess that makes no sense. So point number 2, less is more. I mean, we've mentioned this already a little bit, but The MCU just releases so much content now that I don't know about anybody else, but it's hard to keep up with it all. I personally have given up with the MCU because there's just so much to keep up with. And because there's so much of it, it doesn't feel special anymore. I mean, every new film was like a pop culture significant major moment. Everyone would go to the cinema. I used to go to the cinema and watch them all. You know, I remember going to the midnight screening of Infinity War. You know, it was a big deal. And there weren't that many of them, so you'd build up, you'd watch one and then you'd build up to the next one, whereas now, there's so many coming out that I can't keep up with it. And if you miss one, then you're screwed, because they rely on you having watched all of it now for everything to make sense. And some people like to dip in and out. So ideally what you want to see with Doctor Who is you want the main series to come out, you know, let's just say around April time, and then perhaps a spin-off kind of midway through the year, and then you'll have the Christmas specials and maybe a few specials dotted here and there. At the most, I would say 3 different series in a year. But any more than that, and there's just too much going on. You know, give the audience time to discuss what's happening and speculate about what's going to come. I mean, obviously, we have not made it a secret that we haven't enjoyed these massive gap years. And we know that Russell T Davies is abolishing the gap years. So that's great. But don't go too far the other way and bombard us with content just because you feel the need to make sure that we remain interested. The other thing with less content is you revisit characters quicker. I mean, if you look at the MCU, there are so many unanswered questions and big cliffhangers that have been left dangling, and you're going to have to wait probably years to get answers to those, if at all. What the hell was Harry Styles doing at the ending of Eternals? Or, you know, has everyone forgotten about that big celestial that's just like popped up out the middle of the sea? Shang-Chi, for example, or White Vision. You know, these characters that popped up and seemed so significant and are significant with regards to the comics, but we're going to have to wait years to find the answers to that, because in the meantime, we've got another 10 movies and TV shows to get through that introduce a whole other load of characters before we even get back to these ones. And then by the time they come back, you've forgotten their relevance, or you've completely forgotten that they even exist, and you go, oh yeah, that happened. And as I said, one of the biggest issues, I think, I mean, I don't think this will be the case with Doctor Who. It's very much a series. There's no movies necessarily involved, but one of the biggest issues with the MCU now is that it spreads so much across TV shows and movies that it relies on you having watched all of those TV series in order to understand what's going to happen in the next movie. And not everybody has access to that, not everybody has the time to do that, not everyone is interested enough to watch every single thing, which I guess kind of I've covered slightly then my next point number 3, connected but not too connected. As I said, this has been a big issue with the MCU. It used to be that if you hadn't read any of the comics, the film still made sense. If you missed one film, it didn't matter if you watched the next one. There would be references, but it wouldn't matter to you if you hadn't seen it. Now, there's so much reliance on you having seen everything that you miss one tiny thing and it doesn't make sense. I mean, think, for example, if you hadn't have watched WandaVision, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness would have made absolutely no sense to you. Why the hell is Wanda all of a sudden evil? Why has she got kids all of a sudden? What the hell happened there? No, it never used to be like that, and I think that's what I used to love about the MCU, is that you could watch things individually or you could watch everything together and it would make more significant sense, but it didn't matter either way. And this is what we don't want to see happen with regards to Doctor Who. By all means have spin-offs, but if you think about the spin-offs that we've had before, Torchwood made sense and stood on its own. And there were references to the Doctor, but it actually didn't matter if you hadn't seen Doctor Who at all, because this was a new story, new characters, and it didn't really matter. And likewise with the Sarah Jane Adventures. If you did know that backstory, then it gave you this extra level of understanding, but you didn't need it. You know, and for example, and then when they then crossed over with the main show itself, again, it didn't matter. You didn't watch Captain Jack running towards the TARDIS and suddenly think, what? You know, they didn't change him in any way. He doesn't suddenly have like a wooden leg and an eye patch and all these things that had happened to him in Torchwood that then suddenly when he reappears in Doctor Who, it didn't make sense because you hadn't seen Torchwood. You know, it just kind of went, oh, here's Torchwood, here tells you what's happened to Jack in the meantime, but it actually doesn't matter. And likewise, further on in that story, he then says to the Doctor, I've rebuilt Torchwood. You don't need to have seen Torchwood to understand what that means. They're connected, but not too connected. You know, and that's what we would hope in the future for Doctor Who. You don't want anything to be so connected that if you miss one thing, you completely don't understand what's going on. And I guess the final point being, don't skimp on the episode counts and the run times. When the MCU first announced that they were going to be releasing TV shows, they were advertised to be, you know, movie-level blockbuster level TV shows. We were promised big budgets and massive events, and basically to feel like each episode was like watching a feature film. They have clearly spent a lot of money on these projects. The storytelling seems to be lacking. You know, a lot of them, they feel very underdeveloped and rushed, to the point where some of them are only coming out at 30-35 minutes long. I mean, if you're waiting weekly to see the next episode, and then what you actually end up is a 30-minute episode that doesn't really develop anything very much, and at least 5 minutes of that is credits, you're gonna feel really disappointed and just like, why have I invested my time in this? Secret Invasion, the total runtime for all of those episodes was 3 hours and 43 minutes. She-Hulk was 3 hours and 53 minutes, and Miss Marvel was 3 hours and 57 minutes. I mean, at this point, really, what are you doing? You've basically got a really long film or a really naff TV series, and really what you should be doing, if this is the case, is making some cuts and creating a film. And then by comparison, you've got things like House of the Dragon, or The Last of Us, or The Rings of Power, which were all coming out at, you know, between an hour or even an hour and a half. Now, obviously, we're not saying that Doctor Who needs to have 90-minute episodes in order to be great, but what we are saying is that each episode needs to feel like it's a really strong story, and that every element of it is really vital and important. We don't want any of this 6 episodes at 35 minutes and it's just utter nonsense and rubbish. Now, if you're going to have a reduced number of episodes, then those episodes need to be really, really jam-packed with everything that makes the episode so powerful and dramatic. And then following on from that, you know, with spin-offs, you want them to feel like they've been given just as much love and attention as the main show itself. You don't want to switch on a spin-off like Torchwood or the Sarah Jane Adventures, for example, and go, oh, well, there's the cheap version. You know, you want everything to feel like it's being given just as much attention. If you then compare that to the Doomsday material that we did have over the last year, it had been criticised for its very low budget feel, the kind of really iffy acting. Everything about it just felt like no one was really giving it that much attention. And that's not what we want to happen with the spin-offs going forward in this new Whoniverse. Everything needs to be given as much attention as it possibly can, in order to feel like it's a major event. And as I've said many, many times already in this video, the mantra for Doctor Who going forward should be quality over quantity. If there is any takeaway from this entire discussion, quality over quantity all the way. Please and thank you, RTD, our one true Doctor Who god. And that's everything for this discussion, but make sure you check out our latest editorial about why the Whoniverse might not be available in your country. In the meantime, I've been Ellie with WhoCulture, and in the words of River Song herself, goodbye, sweeties.